Despite me being a complete sucker for bottle episodes in this show, this is one I genuinely forgot about in the grand scheme. No surprises really, Mark Gatiss wrote this one. The only things I remembered about it were the Ice Warrior special effects getting gradually worse throughout and questionable Russian accents. Or should I say, non-existent Russian accents. I know the hostility between Russia and the West has been reignited literally this year, but it really does seem like this choice was to prevent stepping on toes and opening old wounds. On the flip side, they paint the Russian characters like they're ordinary blokes, so by extension, the lack of accents reinforces this idea too. Unfortunately, this leads to questionable moments, like when Clara talks about modern 21st century concepts to this side character.
Karaoke? Hen night? You speak excellent Russian, my dear, but sometimes I don't understand a word you're talking about.
You've both got the same bloody accent. Why couldn't they have hired Russian actors? I'd rather not get into the sticky hiring practices of the BBC. I'm just a bumbling idiot that likes to rant about the UK's biggest sci-fi TV show. So, without further ado, let's get down to business. There are a couple of Game of Thrones actors thrown into this episode, namely Liam Cunningham and Tobias Menzies. Hell, it's not just Game of Thrones. Tommy Lee Royce from Happy Valley shows up here. The only one I wasn't sure of was this knockoff Peter Serafinowicz that just acts as the guy most likely to fire his gun. Even a young Prince Charles is seen in a cute little navy outfit. Just look at him! Who has decided it's time to thaw the Iceman known as Skaldak. As you guys know, I love a bit of mystery setup, and this episode is no exception. I like the Ice Warrior in the basement idea, able to be freed from his imprisonment thanks to impatience and distractions from the nuclear drill happening upstairs. I also wondered why the Soviets are submarining it up in the North Pole of all places. It actually makes more sense than I initially thought. Apparently the first Russian nuclear submarine made it to the North Pole underwater, despite this being something the Americans did 4 years prior. So there is a precedent for Russian submarines being in the North Pole, especially nuclear ones. The only thing standing between these guys and nuclear annihilation is their old granddad that they stowed aboard for some reason.
This means nothing to me. Oh, Vienna. Oh.
All the noise, hubbub, and panic set up from this drill grinds to a halt because of a bit of soft singing. Okay. After a brief moment of reprieve, we're thrown back into the action with the monster let loose. I loved the Doctor appearing at the worst possible moments, but the scene becomes awkward and clunky due to the Soviets just gawping at the pair, with the Doctor just fixing the situation with a bunch of suggestions.
Sideways momentum! Sideways momentum! What? You're gonna let this madman give the order?
There's also something frustratingly cliche about characters in charge obeying the Doctor unconditionally as well, presumably just to create an antagonistic character on the human side. I honestly don't think it would have made a dent if they'd just had the submarine crash down on these rocks without all this blubbery dialogue. The TARDIS then mysteriously flies away on its own, apparently because the Doctor had been tinkering with it. The intense questioning from the captain worked to the scene's advantage. Half the conversation is blurred out to give us a sense of disorientation from Clara as she wakes up. We even get a sense of how hardened and time-sensitive the captain is.
Breath's precious down here. Let's not waste it, eh?
You're right. Maybe I could save a little oxygen by having you both shot!
Then follows a pantomime-esque moment with the Doctor unable to notice Skaldak standing behind him, which would frustrate me were it not for there being perfectly good reasons for him not to.
What is that, gas?
You have to commend how the music flourishes in this moment as well, giving it some real weight to accompany the unmoving, ominous alien creature.
It's not a mammoth.
You also have to give credit to Smith's slight hysterics in the delivery of this line here as well. The lighting, all the characters frozen in place, it's great. Them having a goddamn cattle prod on board the submarine though.
So why have you got a cattle prod on a submarine?
Polar bears.
I'm fairly certain this is a euphemism for torture. I also have to commend the revamping of the Ice Warrior costume. My understanding is that this is the original outfit, just with a few bits and pieces added on, and I appreciate that. They do a fantastic job of making him feel heavy from the way he tugs on his chains, and I'm also very glad he doesn't have Lego hands. Steam rising off him, he's bulky as fuck, making those narrow submarine corridors feel even more claustrophobic. Clara gets introduced to the TARDIS translation matrix, which seems to only work on dialogue.
Maybe they're telling the truth.
The truth?
Yes, sir. revolutionary concept, I know.
See, that's funny, because not only was Soviet society built on lies and deception, but also that this old dude would use the word revolutionary seems to be for a modern context. The Soviet Union had been around for 61 years by this point. Maybe Gramps here has known nothing but socialism reigning supreme his whole life. The way he talks and his music taste seem to represent his opposition to being force-fed the idea of extreme patriotism. Although it is a little surprising he hasn't been shot by this point. I actually really loved the conversation the Doctor had with the captain after his colleague's dismissal though. The pair smelling each other out as soldiers, deciding who gets to negotiate with Skaldak, though Clara's heroism at this point feels contrived as fuck.
Well, there really is only one choice, isn't there? I don't smell of anything.
Having said that, the episode does challenge this notion at various points throughout. The fact that the whole clunky headset plan goes out the window within seconds for one thing, and how the Doctor falsely told her she was doing a good job adds layers to their characters. Later still, Clara would see a mutilated human body and concludes her heroism is more like a coping mechanism for her than anything else. Finally, she would get a big waffly monologue that convinces Skaldak to be merciful in the final act, which leaves the real intent behind Gatiss questioning her heroism a jumbled mystery. At least he gave it a try though. It was weird to me as well that as soon as she was done talking, Skaldak could mysteriously hear what was being said in the headphones. This makes even less sense when you consider that Skaldak had left the suit by this point. I definitely liked the slowly delivered monologue though.
My daughter stood by me. It was her first taste of action. 5,000 years. Now my daughter will be dust.
Clara then tries to escape from being locked inside this room with the monster. The creature then zips past the three blokes and none of them chase after it. They all went to Clara? It would stand to reason that the captain would be more concerned about his own crew members that the monster will inevitably be targeting right now, but instead he says,
Well, what can he do? Stuck down here like the rest of us? How bad can it be?
Thankfully the Doctor does actually hurl an impressive "Did I ask you" response.
This sub-stuff with nuclear missiles, what do you think Skaldak's going to do when he finds that out? How bad can it be? How bad can it be? It couldn't be any worse.
Second in command, Stepisham is seen repairing something all on his own, which naturally leads to him being clawed up by Slitheen claws. I like the idea of mutually assured destruction being applied to these two characters here. This leads to members of the crew being picked off in less than spectacular style.
The first people in the world to discover a genuine living alien. I don't know.
Imagine being hoisted up by your face to your death and not screaming. Not to mention an off-screen death with an out-of-focus bloody arm and expository dialogue.
Torn apart. It's a monster. I always sing a song.
What?
Keep my spirits up.
Yeah, that would work. This was Pinocchio.
Wow! Loved that line! If only this attitude was consistent with the Clara we saw in the last episode. For some reason the old man's not even bothered by the fact there's water leaking into the ship. He'd rather talk about what Clara gets up to in her spare time.
Tell me about yourself. What'd you like doing? Clara? Clara?
Where still they stage him up like a quasi-villain here, insisting she tell him about the future, but not quite in the way we expect.
Ultravox, do they split up?
You're so funny.
Let her go!
Jesus Christ, that would stop Skaldak dead for sure, right? Because, you know, he's not in his suit or anything.
I guess Grandad's eyesight isn't what it used to be.
I think they should have just killed off the old man at this point. It would have been kind of ironic for a Soviet to declare his love for Western music only to then be killed off. Plus, other minor characters have been killed by the Ice Warrior for less. Instead, Mr. Skaldak, the great Martian general, just spews out his plans like we and the characters didn't know them already.
Martian law decrees that the people of this planet are forfeit. My people are dead. They are dust.
Skaldak hops back into his suit, strutting off to the main room to launch the nukes. The Doctor threatens to blow up the entire ship if he pushes the big red button, which causes Skaldak to take off his helmet. The problem here is twofold. Firstly, CGI, but also, why would he deliberately show off his weak point? It did seem a little odd to me at first. The captain doesn't shoot the bastard there and then for the numerous crew members that were terminated throughout the episode. If this did happen though, I think it unlikely the Ice Warrior UFO would have shown as much mercy as they did. I suppose the Doctor gambled on a lot happening here really, making his screwdriver a detonation device and presuming that the captain wouldn't shoot Skaldak as soon as he showed a sign of weakness. I mean, it's not like he shot the thing on sight when it had its hands all over the old man earlier. Having said that, to assume that the captain was on the same page and also banking on the UFO even showing up does seem like a bit of a stretch. The whole ending has the sentiment of the Cold War in a nutshell. It was an absolute miracle no nuclear weapons were launched on belligerent countries during that time period. Can it simply be boiled down to mercy? It may be an overly simplistic assessment, but I think it's satisfactory enough to wrap this episode up without feeling like the characters got out of it purely on the premise of a Deus Ex Machina. So, did it suck? It's alright. I do like a lot of Cold War dramatizations, but this one is kinda hit and miss. I would have liked to have seen some real anti-Western rhetoric to drive the ideological point home, instead of tiptoeing around it with the old Grandad character. I love the Ice Warrior in design, and the setting seems purpose-built for a modern story with a classic monster. Sadly, it's the simplicity of the story that seems to let it down the most, alongside some needless CGI and any real impactful moments. I give Cold War a 5 out of 10. I'm recording in my underpants. My alarm's gonna go off in 5 minutes. I'm currently cooking chickpeas. You have to commend how the music flourishes, but also that this dude would use throughout the entire episode. There's an alarm going off.
Call now.